Welcome again to our annual Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber State of the State Legislative Luncheon. Again, my name is Mike Crandall. I'm our chairman of the board for this year. I'm going to kind of kick things off. Please feel free to keep eating. You can draw your attention up here if you want. And when you're done eating, desserts are already on the table. So we won't take any breaks, but we're going to begin things. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you again for being here. And then to kind of start things off, if you are a current board member or ambassador of the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber, would you just please stand? So, yes, please give them a round. So, as the chairman, I want to thank each of you for your service and your dedication to the board or to the group of ambassadors. If you are a guest here and you are not currently a member of the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber, those are the people that you want to visit with that can answer questions, can help you get plugged in or involved, or help you even become a member if that's something that would make sense for you. So if you've got those questions, please seek one of those people out. There's some other people that I want to recognize. We've got a couple of our past chairman here today. Not in any specific order, but we have Jane Haskin with First Bethany Bank and Trust. And we'll hold our applause till the end here if I introduce all the past chairmen. So we've got Jeff Knapp with Francis Tuttle Technology Center. We've got Gary Mercer with Mercer Adams Funeral Home. And we have Pat Lewis with OG&E. Could we give them a big round of applause for their service? I will share with you, there was a time in my life that I thought being the chamber chairman seemed pretty cool. It's way more work than you'd ever know. So I look forward to when I can be recognized as a past chairman and get that brief moment of applause. So thank you again for your service. So this luncheon has become quite a tradition. We've been doing this. We actually tried to go back and figure it out, and we cannot figure out how long we've been doing it because we've been doing it for so long. We can't find where it's ever been recorded that it was the first or second or anything else. So this is a long-standing thing for us. So there's a lot of people that we want to recognize that are important influencers in the community. So if you would, you can either stand or raise your hand, and if we'd hold our applause till the end, that would be wonderful. But there's some important people in the community and elected officials that we want to recognize. Again, not in any specific order, but we have Oklahoma County Commissioner Brian Mon. So somewhere in the room, there he is. So, and again, hold your applause. So we'll hold our applause till we get to the end. So we have War Acres Mayor Pat Woolley. We have several members of the War Acres City Council. If you're one of those, raise your hand. So thank you for being here. We've got several members of the Bethany City Council. If you're here, would you raise your hand or stand up? So thank you again. We have Bruce Stone, who's the city manager for the village. Bruce, thank you. We've got Dr. Jerry Stewart, who's the president of Oklahoma City Community College, if you're in the room here somewhere. So thank you very much for being here. We've got Dr. Tom Friedemann with Francis Tuttle Technology Center. Thank you for being here. If we give them a quick round of applause for taking time out of their schedules, I'd appreciate it. This event would not be possible without a lot of the sponsors that we have. So I'm going to run through all of the sponsors of this event, and then I'm going to ask our signature premier sponsor, if you would, to come up and say a couple of quick words. So people that are either sponsors or have a full table here at the event are the City of Bethany, First Bethany Bank and Trust, the City of War Acres, Oklahoma City Community College, OG&E, and the Brad Willis Insurance Agency. Could we give them a quick round of applause for their support? And we're especially thankful and grateful to our presenting sponsor, who has been the presenting sponsor of this annual event for the last 9 years, and that is Tinker Federal Credit Union. Anthony, would you come up and just tell us a little bit about why you sponsored this event and anything you'd like us to know? And this is Anthony Garcia, who's part of their team, so he's got a couple of minutes here.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having us. We definitely appreciate you being out. Like I said, this is our 9th year sponsoring. The Chamber's been great to us. We love being part of the Chamber events, and we welcome you guys to the lunch in the day. For those of you who don't know about Tinker Federal Credit Union, we just celebrated our 70th year this March, so we've been around for a little while. With over $3.5 billion in assets, 330,000 members, and 30 branches throughout the state, we are the largest credit union in Oklahoma. So We do have some strong financial backing there. And we offer a lot of programs. Some of them might be beneficial for you and your employees. We do have a free business partnership program that we offer. We do specialize in financial education. So some of the educators are here with our Core 4 program, especially how important it is these days to have our junior high and our high school students go through that financial literacy program. We do cover some of those bases as well. So we are grateful for everyone being here. We want to thank our legislators. We're very excited about the state of the state, and we know that Oklahoma is going to move forward. So we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your support and all of the great things that Tinker Federal Credit Union and your team do for the community. So thank you very much. Couple of other things that just to make sure we've got some announcements out of the way before we get too deep into this. So we've got a lot of upcoming events. One of the most important ones that I want you to note in your calendar is our biggest annual event here at the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber, and that is the Taste of Northwest. It's coming up in about 8 weeks, 7 weeks. Don't quote me on that. I didn't count them. But it's on Thursday, September 22nd at the Oklahoma History Center. How many of you have been to the Taste of Northwest before? If you haven't, if you aren't one of those people that raised your hand, you might want to look around and see how many people in the room were there and ask them why they've gone so many times. It's a phenomenal, fun event. There's a great auction if you want to pick some things up. It's a great place to do Christmas shopping for those of you that Christmas shop. So there's a lot of great things. So definitely want you to check that out. Again, that's Thursday, September 22nd at the Oklahoma History Center. It's an evening event. I believe it's about 6 till 9-ish. Don't quote me on the exact time, but it'll be a fun evening, and we hope you'll join us for that. We'd now like to ask our legislators and our elected officials who have a spot up here to come up and grab their seats. If they would do that, please, I'd appreciate it. And as they're doing that, I'm going to introduce our moderator. Our moderator is someone who's on the board of directors at the Chamber with me, who I've been fortunate enough to know for some time, and this is Billy Roadley. Let me share with you just a tiny bit about Billy before I turn over the microphone to her. Billy's golden voice, some people say I have a great voice. Billy's voice makes mine pale in comparison. So Billy's golden voice has serenaded Oklahomans for more than 20 years. She's had a phenomenal career in a lot of different things in media, as a reporter, as an editor, and as an anchor on KTOK at one point in time. She's done news radio. She was on OETA's News Awards for a while. She's a current member of the Oklahoma Journalism Hall of Fame. She also serves as the Director of Communications for the Cassidy Financial Group, which is a women-owned financial services firm here in Oklahoma City. In addition, as I'd shared, she's one of my fellow members of the Board of Directors here at the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber. So the way that this is going to work is that I'm going to turn over this microphone to Billy, and Billy's going to kind of lead and moderate today. And then we'll have another microphone that will float between all of our elected officials up here, and I'll help as much as I can to pass that microphone around. So, Billy, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure to do this. I'm very excited every year to have this event happen. I do want to share one quick thing I shared with Representative Eccles when we arrived here today. I'm just back from high school reunion. I won't tell you which one. In Illinois, which is my home state. I've been here forever, so I'm an Okie. But back in Illinois, I was really upset with the legislature this year. I felt like nothing was done. Everybody was fighting. It was awful. And I went to Illinois. We're fine. We're fine here. You guys are great. Illinois hasn't had a budget in, 2.5 years we talked about? No budget for 2.5 years. Agencies have to go beg for money. So these guys are great. Okay. Let's get some folks introduced. You know John Eccles, House of Representative, District 90. Elise Hall, House District 100. Anastasia Pittman, Senate District 48. Jason Nelson is deserting us from House District 87. Randy McDaniel, House District 83. Greg Treat, Senator, District 47. And Sally Kern, who's term limited out this time, House District 84. I do want to introduce, speaking of Sally Kern, Tammy West is in the audience? There she is. She is running for Sally Kern's seat as a Republican, and she is the president still of the Putnam City Board. Okay, very good. And then we also have running against Greg Treat as the Democratic nominee for District 47, Judy Muller-Hopper. Are you here? Okay, very good. I wanted to recognize you as well. Now, it's not a candidate debate. We're doing an autopsy here, so we'll let you guys fight it out later. Okay, and also with us, we're happy to have the Oklahoma Democratic Party Director of Outreach, Aisha Shaw. Could you say hi? So we're well represented here today. Let's get going. There is a funeral today for our beloved Judge Don Deason, and John Eccles is attending that. So he will leave early, so we'll start with him. Besides, you're first on the dais anyway. I want you to tell us, for one thing, you're unopposed. You skate through November. Tell us what you're most proud of. I ended a sentence in a preposition with. You authored 20 measures, a bunch of measures this year. What are you most proud of?
Well, thank you for having me. First, I want to say, and I've told this to you privately, I want to say it to the group, this is my favorite event to come to. This always, the Northwest Chamber does such a wonderful job from great audience participation to really just a fine group of legislators that I say every year I'm honored to be up here with, a bipartisan group up here. You know, to talk about my last year's legislative session, I've got to talk. It was very difficult for me. While we were going through that, we also had my mother, who passed away 3 weeks ago. My mother and father were living with us all legislative session. So we actually moved out of our master bedroom, and my wife and I moved into another room. And you know, my wife is the real saint. It's one thing for me to take care of my parents. It's another thing for her to do it. And we did that February through May. My father was recovering from a knee surgery that went bad, and my mother had 4th-stage breast cancer. And I say that to say I learned a lot about perspective last year. I learned a lot about what's important and what's not, and I learned a lot about who I wanted to be. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I'm most proud of last year in the legislative session. You know, last year was a difficult year. I think nationally, the tone trickled down to the states. I think the tone of discontent and a lack of bipartisanship and a lack of vision and wanting to get things done made it a more acrimonious year. If my consultant was here, he'd say don't use words like acrimonious, but you guys can take it. So it made it a more difficult year, and I would like to say one of the things I did in legislation was stay above that. There were other things going on, and I'm not going to be somebody that if what it takes to be elected is to be mean, hateful, and rude, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, I don't want to be elected. So what we did last year during that very, very difficult time is, I think, and I think I speak for the members of this body, though, we tried to move the state forward. Now, some of those were little things, from things of changing rules for the state fair, so the state fair could function in a better way. Some of those were major things that I pushed last year, sweeping changes to workers' compensation reform to try to keep the reforms that we've received while at the same time trying to be fair to injured workers. And those that know me know I'm a lot of a policy nerd. That's what I like. I do carry a lot of legislation on the floor. I have ever since I've been elected, and I don't anticipate that changing. You see, Doctor. So what we were proud of, we were able to accomplish in a very tough year. We were able to get rid of several tax credits. I believe the fundamentals of the budget are better than it has been, and I think we're moving in a more positive direction in that regard. I think what is left to be done that I went after last year and I wasn't able to get was some more tax credit reform that I think we need to have. and some more off-the-top spending reform. You're not going to be able to change all this in a day. You're not going to be able to make those incremental changes. But I think we're going down that road, and I think we're in a positive direction.
The late David Dank would be very proud of you. That was his major concern. I'd like to go now to Representative Sally Kern, just to make Mike Crandall run around. Okay, you're leaving, and you're termed out, and I wonder what your thoughts are, because we are now losing Lisa Billy, Representative Denny, the whole female contingent is not coming back. What are we going to do about that?
Well, in 2004, when I was first elected, there were 5 female legislators elected, and then in a special election in 2003, Pam Peterson was elected. So there's 6 Republican women out the door, and then there was Jeannie McDaniel, as a Democrat who also is term limited, and I don't think there's another Democrat lady. So seven women are walking out the door. I personally think that we need women in the legislature because we have a different perspective than the men do. Some of these men, it's easy to have a big ego. That's easy for anybody. But I think the women are able to keep some things grounded, and we do have a different perspective simply because we are women. And we have, I was just reading this morning, something like 90 some odd women put their name on the dotted line and ran in the primaries, and 56, I think it is, are still in the running. So it's possible that the 7 that are leaving could be replaced with 7 or more. So only time will tell. But I kind of compare it a little bit to when I taught school. I was a coach, and coaching is kind of a good old boy club. And then when you're the only woman that's a coach, it changes things a little bit. And in a sense, the legislature is kind of like a good old boys club, and they're all good guys. Don't get me wrong, but you just have all this testosterone in the building, and so having women, I think, is very helpful. So we'll see in a few months if there's some replacements.
Okay. Thank you for all you've done. You certainly weren't afraid of a little controversy now and again. Let's go in the middle to Representative Jason Nelson, who decided not to run again. Was it the acrimony and the power plays, the dissension? Why are you leaving? Why did you decide not to run?
Well, those are all the things I'm going to miss the most. A couple of years ago, we went through something that was, John referred to with his parents, with our daughter. She's doing fine now, but it helped kind of adjust my focus in life, and not leaving because of that necessarily, but it just helped me kind of reevaluate what was important. I think what I've done in the legislature, running for the legislature, serving there, has been important. I'll be able to continue, I think, with what I hope my plans are that work out, to be able to work on those things that I'm passionate about. But it was just the right time. I mean, it's a temporary position. You're term limited. You have things you want to accomplish, and you see that maybe in the next 4 years, which I still had in terms of eligibility, you really can't start anything new and finish it. So it just seemed like an appropriate time. I had gotten the Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship Bill for students with disabilities. It's a voucher bill for kids in special education. Had 2 lawsuits that had gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was unanimously upheld as constitutional this spring, which kind of helped me feel that maybe I'd seen that effort through. So it just seemed like a good time to leave. And that's the thing I'm most proud of this year. Leaving. That is funny. One of the things that I am proud of, since you asked the question of somebody else a while ago, I want to answer that. Anastasia and I had filed the same bill unbeknownst to each other in 2010 and worked together on that effort, and she was absolutely essential to the passage of the bill, was a partner all the way. She has background in education and was a great sounding board, and was an important advocate in her caucus. And one of the things that, maybe mixed reviews up here on the panel, but was the autism insurance bill that we passed this year without any fight. We didn't have a repeat of what happened several years ago. But I immediately went, when the idea came to me, to work with Democrats and Republicans and put together a group of members from both parties. Since I've been in the legislature, have intentionally tried to work across the aisle and have been very successful doing that. And I know other members up here have done the same thing. So I think that's one of the things I'm proud of that I've done as well.
Can we pass it down to Elise Hall, please? You're one of the newbies, kind of, and so you've got a long way to go. And I'm going to ask you not only what you've done in 2016, of which you might be proud, but what do you think you might be able to do next session? What's you're in the leadership, hopefully. Well, I'm not biased, so perhaps you will continue to be in the leadership of the majority. What do you want to do? What are you proud of, and what do you want to do?
It's true. I am one of the newbies. I was elected in 2010, and one of the things that I think is the greatest joy of serving in the legislature is that we serve. And as I've been out campaigning this summer, I think that is the most incredible opportunity, is that the job of a representative is to represent the people of your district. And I really think that comes down to serving. And so I worked with Senator Holt on an issue that was a issue that we had a constituent in common that had a concern about genealogy. And so he had been working with the health department to get vital records. And I know this sounds like a kind of a funny idea, to something to work on, but it was an issue 2 or 3 years ago that we had worked on together, and the health department was not amenable to our ideas of editing how somebody could get a vital record of a birth and death certificate for genealogy purposes. And this year, the health department came to Senator Holt and myself and said, hey, we want to make these changes. And so it was really exciting to be able to come back to that constituent and say, hey, look, all those things we tried 2 or 3 years ago, now we're able to actually do because the health department is on our side. I'm a small business owner. My sister and I own a small business. I was raised in a family that was supported by small business. And so my goal as a state representative is to be able to serve my constituencies that are small business owners, because they are the foundation of who we are as a community and who we are as a state and in the country. Small business owners are the largest employers in the nation. And so being able to make sure that you are able to run your business the way you want to run your business and hire the people you want to hire and not go through taxes and regulations that inhibit your growth and inhibit you selling the products and making the services and all that you want to do.
Let's go on down to Senator Treat. Certainly in the leadership of the Senate. And you're tan because you've already been out knocking on doors, even though you don't have a runoff election. So about what are you most proud, and where do you want to go next year?
There are two things. One, on a small level, thank you for having me first. I always enjoy this opportunity and appreciate the food was excellent today. Or I was starving, one of the two. But I stole that line from someone at my table a while ago. No, there are two things. One, small. I get my hair cut, and there's not much to cut anymore, from a guy who was closed one day when I went by his office, and I needed to go do a sales meeting for my other job. And went across the street to a Great Clips, and the lady there had a Post-it note over her address on her license. And I said, why do you have that there? Why do they even need your personal address? And she said, well, why? Are you with the state? And I said, well, I'm a senator, but I think it's asinine they require your personal address. What is your story? And she said, well, I'm a victim of domestic abuse. I left the household. I have a child who lives with me. And I don't want everyone who comes in this door to see my home address. So I went to the Board of Cosmetology and said, why are you requiring people to have this address? And they said, well, we've been thinking about it for a few years to get rid of it. I followed back up with the hairstylist and said, have they come and talked to you? Because I gave them her contact information. And she said no. So I filed a bill and forced their hand. And they said, we're going to do it through rules. And I said, I'm going to give you until April to get it done. And if you don't get it done until April, it's going to be law. You have to do it. So we were able to pass that this year. And it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing for that lady. And so I'm proud of that. The thing that captured headlines, that didn't capture any headlines. The thing that captured headlines was I was able to be the author of 3 of the 4 criminal justice bills that were able to get smarter on crime in Oklahoma. And I'm participating on an interim study this year, or interim task force, to try to look at ways we can even improve more. We changed the felony threshold on property crime from 500 to 1,000. It hadn't been updated in 14 years. We took DAs and gave them more discretion on whether or not they wanted to file a felony or a misdemeanor. When somebody has a felony on their record, it changes their ability to be employed, to be a productive member of society and a taxpayer, so I was proud to be a part of that. But 3 of the 4 proposals came through me being the author, and I plan on continuing that work as we move forward. Also, I'm the Vice Chair of Appropriations, so assuming that I get reelected, I'm not don't assume anything, but if I do, likely will be the next Chair of Appropriations. I want to change the way we do budgeting, bring a little more transparency to the system, and I'm working on that over this interim.
We hear that a lot from you all, the transparency issue, and forums such as this are a great way to do that. And you speak of this little barbershop cosmetology thing. For small businesses, all of us here, that is a big thing. It's no small thing. Can you pass the microphone down to Senator Pittman, please? Okay. You obviously play well with others. Of what are you most proud in 2016? What would you like to see coming up next session?
Thank you so very much, and I'm happy to be here. These were my colleagues before I came to the Senate, so I got my training in the House. So I'm happy to be here. One of the things that I'm most proud of is also working with the chairmen of various committees. Anthony Sykes, Senator Sykes, was the chairman of Judiciary, and we were able to work on a piece of legislation that he thought he had done previously and taken care of it, and that was to allow judges to have the discretion to give driver's license after people had finished their court sentence as far as drug court was concerned. The driver's license is approved as long as you're in drug court, receiving the treatment, going to work, doing what you need to do. But upon graduation, your driver's license was no longer valid. And you only had 30 days to pay all of the fines and the fees, which sends people into a spiral of how they're going to pay for all these fees and return to being a productive citizen. So we were able to allow the judge to have discretion, because that's the person that's in their courtroom showing support from families and churches and employers, to allow them to have a driver's license after graduation for up to 12 months so that they could contribute to their household and take care of their families while they're paying these fees on their journey to success and recovery. So that was one of the things that I was able to work across the aisles with Senator Sykes and accomplish. The second thing we were able to work across the aisles with Senator A.J. Griffin, we created a little student task force to allow students to be able to talk about things on high school campuses and college campuses because of date rape and because of things that were going on, especially an event in Norman where we had several young athletes, male athletes, who took advantage of some girls, but there was no process in place for them to be able to talk about it on campus. If you didn't have litigation or didn't have the funds to get an attorney, students are affected by this, but they weren't allowed to talk about it. So we included student suicide, all the things that affect young people, but they can come together and talk about those things with a counselor, with someone of that legal background to help them decide what their solutions were going to be. So we've had several successes, and even in education where we've been most challenged with teacher pay and those things. So we've worked with Senator Sharp on education. We've worked with Senator Ford on education and been quite successful in doing incremental things that will allow students to get enrolled and have alternative pathways to success if a four-year college degree was not in their path.
Thank you. Now to Representative McDaniel, who is an author. And you had your book here last year. Where is it?
Very exciting book to read, yes.
It's about pensions, yeah.
Yes.
It was great. I come to you last because you're a competitor in business, but other than that.
They always say you save the best for last, but it's always the person that's last that usually says it.
Again, of what are you proud last year? Where do you want to go next year? Whoa. I hope that's not an indication of our future.
Well, some issues that we haven't talked about. Again, I want to say thank you, like everyone has. This is always a great event. The food was delicious, always good company, and I think we're well represented on both sides of the aisle. And some key business issues that didn't get a lot of media attention that we put together that made a difference. I'm very proud of those. I was either the co-author or the main author on all of them. One had to do with franchise owners. The federal government came in and said that we're going to change the rules of the game, where basically the corporate entity had to have the liability of all the franchise owners out there, which has always been a separation. They're responsible for their employees from a liability standpoint, but each, let's say Subway or every other shop, they would have to have that liability for them. And so we clarified that the stance in Oklahoma will remain, that we want to continue to have the law as it is, and we did have the flexibility and the authority to do that and pass that. Another one had to do with unemployment taxes. It's just one of those things that just kind of goes under the radar, but we have found out that they weren't updating the manuals online, and so their solution was we're just going to stop doing it. The business community spoke back and said, no, we want that information. We just want it halfway where we can find out what the real rules of the games are. And so that was a big win for business and for every company in the state. And then we had one other issue with seasonal workers, trying to make that a fair policy that we've been looking at for 3 or 4 years. And so we got all 3 of those done. I was proud that that was considered some of the key business issues in Oklahoma this year. I still think now I'm going to transition into where we need to go. We need to do better with education. We got to pay our teachers better. We got to find solutions. It's time for us to stop just talking about it and get something done. And so I'm looking forward to finding real answers to one of our great challenges.
That leads me into what I'd like to discuss next, and this is wide open. Let's have a show of hands of all of you who want to go into special session. Okay.
You know my response to that, though. I don't think that's a fair question.
Okay.
I think, and I've been public with this statement, but the question is, do you want to go into special session, giving you a option choice of are you for teacher pay raises or you for special session?
Exactly, and that's how it's being presented. Yeah.
If I were to look at a plan, I would analyze that plan and decide whether or not that's a good idea. But at the moment, I don't see a plan, so I think special session is out of view.
And Billy, since I have the microphone,
Okay, go.
yes, I think that's the good point. I mean, I am for finding an answer, but the proof is in the details. How are we actually going to get it done? What's the funding stream going to be? But I think we do need to find an answer, and I think we have a chance to do that.
I didn't want him to hear the other stuff.
Representative Nelson, would you want to interrupt your retirement for a special session? And what
as long as I don't have to shave, I'm fine with whatever we do.
Yeah, that was a surprise for everyone when you walked in today. No, I'm seriously. Have you looked at the call? Is specifically to try to avoid a vote on the David Boren tax, is what people are calling it.
It's I don't know that there's a plan out there right now that you could do that totally makes sense that is ready for special session. I would be fine with a special session if we had such a plan on the table. A special session would take 5 days constitutionally, and would be limited to what the call is. So you wouldn't see a lot of extraneous things, but I think Randy was right about, what is the funding stream. Right now we just have the excess funds that we didn't think we were going to have last year, so you have that. What about next year? And that's one of the concerns that frankly I had a year and a half ago when we tapped rainy day then, was that we knew we were going to have a tough year this next. We weren't sure, but I was concerned we would have a tough year this current year, and of course we did, in a worse way than we could have imagined. And it was somewhat of a repeat of the economic cycle when I was a freshman in 2009. When I was first running in 2008, in about August, we really started sliding into the Great Recession, and the legislature held firm on not tapping rainy day out of fear that it was going to continue to get worse, and it ends up we did the right thing. So I think there's good reason to be cautious. We do need to pay teachers more. But I will say, one of the things that frustrates me more than anything is the most important relationship in the education system is the teacher and the student. That's where the magic happens. And if you look at how schools get money to the classroom, there's wide disparity. I'm guessing tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, the system-wide, don't get to the classroom, don't get to the teacher to benefit the students. And you can look at the percentage of money that goes to the classroom. And Earl Sears, the budget chairman, former building principal for years and years and years, ran a bill to say you got to have at least 60% of the money go to the classroom. That means 40% of the money doesn't go to the classroom. It's for other things. And we had adjusted in the bill, and it still failed, what constitutes classroom. And we included school nurses and counselors, people like that are critical to the proper function of the school in that. And so many schools still would not have made the threshold. So there's a lot of money not getting to the classroom, and efforts to make sure it gets there have been turned down several times. So I think just more money is not going to necessarily solve the problem. The teacher pay raise might if it goes straight there, but it also gives us the highest sales tax in the country, this proposal does. There's no reform. There's no guarantee that the positions that get the money from one school district to another are the same. You can look at Tulsa and Oklahoma City and how they report the teachers, similarly sized school districts, and you'll find that I think they're counting who is just because you're a certified teacher doesn't mean you're adding value to the students in the classroom because of what your position may be. So part of this needs to be you get the money to the classroom, but you also have some kind of reform that the financial system of the schools too that needs to be tied to that.
Senator Treat, you're all about the money and budgets, and so how are we going to fix it? You mentioned transparency, and we need a budget earlier in the year. Do you not agree?
I agree. It's harder to do than to say. We started working on the budget well before session started with our counterparts both in the House and in the governor's office. And we didn't know our true revenue picture until a week before the end of session because we didn't pass all the bills that generated revenue until that last Friday before the last week of session. So if you don't know your revenue, you can't possibly figure out how to spend it. And if you overspend, you get the automatic cuts that the state does that we've seen in this $140 million cut out. So absolutely, I believe that we should have a more open process with the way we have constitutionally the limitation on the legislature, the number of days we're in. It becomes very difficult to have as much transparency as I would like because you've got February, March, April, May to get it done, and you have to go through all the committee process and all the conference committee process. But is it as transparent as it should be? No. And we are going to work extremely hard to get more eyes on the budget earlier on.
Representative Kern, we're all about funding education, it seems, this year. It drew out so many teachers and educators to run for office, and we have many of them running for office. You're a former teacher. Tell us how you feel about the state of education funding in Oklahoma.
Well, I adhere to the principle that a workman is worthy of their hire, and so I think teachers need to be paid adequately.
Merit?
I would be for some merit pay, yes. Of course, when I taught down in Texas, they had some merit pay, and the way they did it, it created more problems than solved problems, because you got to where teachers wouldn't share with other teachers because somebody might get their good idea and then they would get the merit pay next year and they wouldn't get it. So, you know, it's so easy to talk about teachers need a raise. You know, we need more transparency with the budget. We need to get it done earlier. Listen, if it were simple to do, it would have been done years before we ever got there. You know, so this is not an easy process. I agree wholeheartedly with Jason that too much of the money in education is not going to the student. And I also believe that who are the primary educators of students? It's not that teacher, although they are key in the education system. But the primary educator of a student is their parents. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that those parents have the freedom that they need to send their children to the school that they believe will give them the best education. And of course, I'm talking, we had the Henry Nicole Scholarship, and we tried to get, was it educational savings accounts? But there is an education establishment that does not want the system changed at all. As you heard, they don't even want more money going to the student. So it's hard to change the system. As far as a special session, you know, unless we have a plan before we go back there, it's a waste of the taxpayers' money. We don't want to make anybody look bad by going for 5 days and getting nothing done. So other states seem to be able to find a way to pay their teachers a little bit better. I will say, let me share this from personal experience. Yes, I was an educator here in Oklahoma before I was elected. In the first year that I was in the legislature, I went to the State Department of Education and asked, what would it cost? How could I get my education retirement switched over to the legislative retirement? And they sent me a letter, and it was going to be something like, and this just blew my mind, it's going to blow yours, was going to cost me up front $150,000 approximately, plus I never signed a contract for more than $39,000 when I worked in Oklahoma City. And I looked at that sheet of paper, and they had my total salary over $49,000. So I went up there and asked them primarily about, you know, the $150,000, that was just out of the question, but I wanted to know, where did they get $49,000 plus? And so they started naming all of these benefits that are not shown on the contract when a teacher signs. And so I personally think that we're not 49th in the nation because of that discrepancy. And we tried to get a bill passed this year, remember, that was going to require school districts to list on a teacher's contract all the benefits so a teacher could see their real, true, honest salary. And it was defeated. So this thing of teacher pay is not as cut and dry as everybody wants to make it sound. So it's nothing up there is easy.
I'd like Senator Pittman's view of this because you are an educator as well.
That's correct. One of the things I want to make sure we address, and I think we tend to mull over it, nobody wants to increase taxes, for one. But the problem has been so systemic for a number of years that it's so hard to correct. Number one, if the formula of funding does not change, then the per pupil spending does not change. So Oklahoma continues to be ranked 49th in per pupil spending. So that's a category within itself. The second thing we have to look at is you're looking at a penny sales tax that would bring maybe 6.15 million. You're looking at $615 million. But the goal is to give each teacher in Oklahoma a $5,000 pay raise. So when you start talking about money going to the classroom, it still doesn't equate to teachers getting their pay raises. That's a separate ball game. The third thing that frustrates me is that we have almost 600 school districts in Oklahoma. And when you look at local control, when you look at local government, you look at the boards of education and how many superintendents we pay, and we pay them generally $100,000. Now, it can go up to $200,000 as well, depending on where you are. But the population of their district is less than 300. So when you have less than 300 students, but you as a superintendent can still get paid $180,000 while your teachers' salaries are capped at $25,000, I think there's a disparity there. And if we mentioned Texas earlier. Well, Oklahoma has 77 counties. In the state of Texas, they have one superintendent for each county. So Oklahoma has not looked at that, but I don't think Oklahoma's willing to merge. I think the superintendents and the boards of education who govern local control as to how our funding gets done for public schools, the legislature can vote to increase that 69%. As a matter of fact, when my colleagues tell me, Anastasia, we are supporting education. You're getting 60% of the budget. We can't do any more. But it doesn't guarantee that it goes to the classroom. He's right. Representative Nelson is absolutely correct. So when you look at priorities in education, we can pass a budget that says we want 65% to go to education. But if we don't line item those things to say this much is going to go to administration, this much is going to go to after-school programs, this much is going to go to classrooms, then we still miss the mark. We still pour money into a dark hole, and that's where school choice comes in. I support public education, but I also want to empower parents to be able to be mobile to get their students the proper education that they need, whether they're a special needs student or whether they have some at-risk factors that set them back. Whatever it is, I look at the Northeast Oklahoma City, which I govern Oklahoma County. I have 6 municipalities in my district. But when I look at the disparity of funding that comes to those schools, I have schools in my district that don't have teachers in the classroom all semester long. I have textbooks that have not been updated for 10 years. And so are we saying to those children, are you worthy? And is it equality that we're looking for, or is it equity? Because on certain parts of the state, you may need $12 per pupil increase to get them to the level that they need. And then other parts of the state, you need $22 to get them where they need. So it's frustrating as an educator, and that's one of the reasons why I came out of the classroom and ran for office.
Will you go back to the classroom when your term limited?
It's been a consideration. I want to go back to school first. There are a lot of things that have changed. A lot of our educators are under so much pressure. They've been teaching to the test. There are mandated tests. And we don't have reading coaches. Sometimes we have teachers that can't teach reading. And before I go back into the classroom, I'd like to see Smart Start expand. We only have them in 13 counties in Oklahoma. But Oklahoma used to be number one in early childhood education. Where did we lose that? And so for those who have cultural differences where they keep their children at home, that's almost a disservice, because now our children with ethnic backgrounds don't come to the classroom with the same level of words in their vocabulary. And yes, they may have been nurtured and loved, but they're at a deficit when they come to kindergarten. What are our kindergarten requirements? And first through second grade, you can't just measure them in third grade and say you've missed the mark in reading. So we've got to do a better job. So I would like to go back and get educated myself so that we're not just changing policy, but we're advocating for great things to happen in education.
And I'll mention one thing that's easy for me to say since I'm not running again, but hopefully you're going to have new leadership in both the House and the Senate for the first time, where that's happening simultaneously in 6 years or something like that, with the change of the pro tem in the Senate, for some serious rethinking of what we tax and where we spend the money. It was interesting a few years ago when Representative Dank ran, I believe it was a bill on lowering the automatic cap for increasing property taxes. I was talking to one of the freshmen while the debate was going on. I said, "You watch this. You're going to see Mike Shelton, a Democrat, and Sally Kern both vote for it. And if I'm not mistaken, they both actually debated for it. That's rare. Maybe the only time it ever happened. So the public is very opinionated about taxes. It may not seem like that to the casual observer, but it's interesting, and it's, I think, instructive to see that President Bourne did not propose a referendum on the income tax cut. That would have been the easy thing to do. If you don't like the income tax cut because you're an educator and you don't think we should be doing that, why didn't you do that? Because if you got a referendum on the ballot on the income tax cut to roll that back and it was successful, then you'd see the legislature stop looking at that. That was not chosen for a reason. The public supports it. And we're a representative body, whether you're in the House or the Senate, and that matters. But then I think just today, or in the last few days, Oklahoma City's sales tax revenue is down still yet. So there's got to be some reform of how we do our taxes. That is going to be a big challenge, and I think that's something that we're all going to have to watch. One thing I want to mention, too, Anastasia triggered this, but not enough reading coaches. When I've talked to new teachers, they don't feel like they come out of college prepared, including my sister, who's about 6 years into her teaching career. One of the things that has got to happen, the legislature can't tell higher ed what to do because higher ed is constitutional. What we can do is say to be certified as a teacher in the state, you have to have had this kind of training or education. And the legislature is going to have to develop the backbone to say, to be a teacher certified in the state of Oklahoma, you have to have been trained and educated in these areas. And it was interesting, on the standards rewrite, the steering committee that's happened over the last few years, the chancellor of higher education serves on that steering committee along with a lot of administrators and teachers. And they started really taking higher ed to task that you're sending us teachers that aren't prepared to teach in the classrooms and the diversity of the students that are in the classroom. So there's a lot of these kinds of things. I want to see higher pay for teachers, but we also need to, at the same time, be working to get higher ed to get on board with helping really prepare the teachers for what they're going to face when they get to the classroom. And that's just not happening. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
Elise Hall, I'd like to ask you free advice. You have a room filled with small business owners and small business employees. We're going to be hiring some of these students eventually someday. What is your advice to us in this room as to what to watch in the legislative process? What should we be watching and be aware of next year and in future sessions?
I would say, as a small business owner, it's difficult to watch because you're running your business, you're looking to hire, you're looking to expand, you're trying to figure out how to juggle all the moving pieces of being a small business owner. And so it's hard to pay attention. It's hard to know exactly what's going on. And so my advice to you guys is create a personal relationship with your legislator so that you know that you can say, hey, I've got this issue with sales tax reporting, and I can call up John Eccles and give him a call and say, hey, this is my issue. Can you help me out? And is there a way that we can work with the tax commission to find a solution? So I think it all comes down to having a personal relationship, because I know that you guys are busy and it's hard to pay attention to all of the moving parts. Obviously, we know that next year we will still be in a similar budget situation, and that the $1.3 billion that we experienced in a shortfall this year could likely happen again. And so I think that that's going to be probably the main priority, in working with, as Representative Nelson mentioned, that we'll have new leadership both in the House and in the Senate, and looking at the ways that we can expand the budgeting process. I know I've spoken with Representative Eccles and Representative McCall, who's the Speaker Designate for the House, on looking at doing interim studies on the budgeting process for each of the appropriations and budget subcommittees for education or transportation to each work throughout the summer and fall on their particular budget so that members can be more attuned with the budgeting process and it doesn't become something that just rolls out at the end of session. And so I think that would be, and that was one of my priorities this session. I think it's hard to do major reform in a year when you're working on the budget so much. And so I think that will continue to be something that we'll have to work on this next year.
Representative Eccles, the same question to you. Since you don't have to worry about debating or campaigning or anything like that, you've had a rough year. But tell us what we need to be watching.
Well, unfortunately, I have to worry about 72 races. That's what I'm over right now for the House. I'm very actively involved with the new Speaker and the political operations in the House. And I would say what you need to be watching next year, and this ties into the legislature overall, though, it's very easy to come to the Northwest Chamber and hear, for example, school district consolidation and say we have a bipartisan group. I'm willing to bet almost everyone would agree to some form of it. So I would leave if I were you and think, why in the world has that not happened yet? And this is when you're watching.
I don't even want to bring up the C word. I haven't.
well, it's overwhelmingly popular in my district if you're talking about dependent school districts. Those are school districts that don't have a high school. However, the real divide in the Oklahoma legislature is not Democrat and Republican. The real divide in the Oklahoma legislature is rural and urban. And the needs of rural Oklahoma and the needs of urban Oklahoma are very different. And that's why we live in a representative democracy. And that's what it is. And we're here to represent the views of our district. But that doesn't mean that if I live in the Panhandle, I view the world the same way that my constituents that live on Northwest 10th Street view the world. So those are the issues you're going to watch. Even when you talk about issues like, for example, the sales tax, we're going to move to one of the in the top 50 cities. Tulsa and Oklahoma City are going to be number 2 and 3 if that passes. On the income tax, we're low to average. We're high middle right now on the income tax. On property taxes, we're one of the lowest in the nation. So why are we not looking at that? I get emails about that all the time. Because there is, it's a negative number, the chances of that passing a vote of the people, because rural Oklahoma would come out against it in droves. When you're talking about issues that face this state, one of the greatest assets we have, and when you're watching, is our diversity, is the fact that we have 2 strong metro areas coupled with some strong things going on in rural Oklahoma right now. But what you will see when we're going through is I think the next leadership in both the House and the Senate is interested in being more than caretakers of the budget. I could have a computer program come up with a budget that would balance. Now, passing it is a totally different deal. But I think you're going to see House leadership and Senate leadership that's interested in moving the state forward and tackling some of these issues. Nobody in my district is talking about water, but you should be. You should be very concerned about it. But we don't know about it because when we turn on our tap, water comes out. But that's a real issue. And right now, because it's rained, which has been Oklahoma's water policy for 100 years, we hope God sends us some, that's not a great policy. We're going to have to be dealing with those issues. And we're going to have to be dealing with what are we going to do with these reforms in school? What are we going to do? When we talk about school district consolidation, I believe the Western Heights School Board I would put them against any school board in the state of Oklahoma. I think they are amazing, the group they do. I got an email when we talked about school district consolidation saying, how dare you consider this? I replied back, you're a 5A school. When we get to you in 150 years, I'll talk. I mean, these are not the issues that are going to come through. What we're dealing with right now is when you talk about consolidating administrators of dependent school districts, you have 4,000 people show up at the Capitol. These are the issues you need to be watching. And what you want from your legislator, I hope, is something different. The speaker's a dear friend of mine, the new speaker, but he represents Atoka, Oklahoma. I don't have the same views. What we need in Oklahoma City is very different than what we need in Atoka. What we are going to have to do, and we have a southeastern Oklahoma speaker, first time since the 1920s, by the way, we've had a southeastern Oklahoma speaker. We have a Western Oklahoma pro tem. There are some differences. We're going to have to work through those. And we can do one of two things, and I think we're going to do the latter. We can grandstand, and we can stand on our issues and think we're right and do nothing, or we can engage in the art of compromise and view that we're going to move the state forward in a positive direction. And I think you have, and every member on this board is going to be in leadership in their various groups, in my opinion. I'm not the speaker, but I think that's what's going to happen. I think that you have a committed House and Senate to move the state forward on these issues, to not just pass a balanced budget, unlike Illinois. We will pass a balanced budget. But to pick up some of these hard issues, and maybe some of these hard issues that are the right thing to do. I don't have any constituents that work at the Department of Corrections, but we have to do something there. We have to be smart on crime. We have to. We can't continue to lock people up at the rate that we're locking them up. These are the issues that you need people to step up and say, on mental health issues. I'm very actively involved in the CBD oil issue. As many people know, there's not a huge constituency with children with epilepsy, but it's the right thing to do. Those are the things that I think you should be watching, and frankly, those are the things I think you should demand of your legislators.
We're going to have to wrap this up, but I'd like to go to Representative McDaniel, and you're all about number crunching too. And so tell these fine folks from the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber what we should be watching for in terms of numbers out of the coming session.
Are you talking about for the pension system or just the overall state of Oklahoma?
That's the state of Oklahoma. Small business. Let's talk about small business.
Well, there's a lot of key numbers. We know that we are still an energy-based state, and we're proud of it. We want those jobs, and they're driving, and we want to diversify. And one bill that hasn't been talked about was the Energy Stabilization Fund that's going to start taking a more long-term view, and that way it's kind of like another rainy day fund where we can set aside some more money. Because what we have seen the last several years is the fact that the rainy day is not big enough to really offset a real major downturn in oil and gas prices. And so I think it's another example of us trying to look long-term to find real solutions. It's not going to help us near-term. So near-term, it's going to be years before that's going to be able to have a rally in the energy prices, be able to put money back and be able to use that. But in the next recession or the next downturn, that'll be available. And I think it takes those kind of long-term planning. And so just to get real detailed on the numbers real quickly, we had a 3% cut initially. That wasn't enough. Then they went to a 4% cut. Come to find out that the real number was about 4.4% is what we needed. So we now have about $150 million available. That is could be a solution to teacher pay raise issue and some other things. And so next year, we're not out of the woods yet. It's going to be another tough year, but I think things are starting to turn around. We bounced from $29 a barrel. We're up, moving on upwards, and obviously $60 would solve a lot of our problems.
Let's leave it at the up note. Please, if you have any questions, that we just have a couple of minutes left. Anybody have any questions? Well, maybe you can talk to him later. Anyway, join me, please, in thanking all of the senators and representatives. We're real proud of you. Thank you for your service. Mike Crandall.
Yes, thank you very much to all of our elected officials. Greatly appreciate not only your service, but your time and your dedication to come here and spend a little bit of time with us. So thank you very much. Can we give Billy a round of applause? I told you she had a better radio voice than me, didn't I? So I love listening to Billy. She's just got a very awesome voice. So a couple of quick announcements in closing. Again, thank you to all of the past chamber chairmen who made the time to be here. Thank you to all of the community leaders, those of you that are mayors and other elected officials and city council members and leaders of educational institutions. I want to thank you for taking the time and the energy to be here. I want to thank Jill and the chamber staff. They do an amazing job with a pretty small team to put these things together. Can we give them a quick round of applause? We also want to make sure, again, that we thank all of our sponsors, specifically Tinker Federal Credit Union for being our premier sponsor of this event and for 9 years in a row. For all of my fellow chamber leaders, chamber board members, etc. Want to say thank you. 3 things that I want to make sure you're aware of. If you are not a chamber member, we'd love to visit with you about it. Over on the table as you exit is this little pamphlet that's got some of our basic information. You also saw the people that stood up when we talked about ambassadors. They'd love to visit with you about chamber membership and what that means. You heard many, many times reference to small business. We are constantly talked about by other people, not just our own members, that we are a small business chamber. So if you're in business and you're not a member, you probably should be. So 2 other things. We have a lot of events coming up. There's this little flyer that's on the table as you leave that has all of our August chamber events. I won't go through them all, but there's a bunch. And then there's this flyer, our Taste of Northwest event that I let you know about earlier, which is coming up on Thursday, September 22nd. There are some of these that are the save the date. If it's not already on your calendar, it should be. But there's a bunch of these flyers up on the table as you exit, and happy to have you pick one of those up. So on behalf of my fellow board members and the chamber staff, thank you again for being here. Thank you for taking the time and the energy out of your schedules to be involved. There's a lot of people that don't get involved, and obviously by the fact that you're here and you're supporting this event, you're involved, so thank you very much. So as we wrap up, can we give our elected officials one more quick round of applause? So thank you to each of you. For those of you that are in office next year, we hope that you will put this on your calendar and you'll come back and join us again. Those of you that aren't running again or have term limited out, obviously you're welcome to come. We'd love to have you join us as just a participant at the luncheon. So thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon. Appreciate it.